So I've just built a new bike and I used the Wheeltop EDS Groupset. So what if I told you that I thought the shifting was actually pretty great, but that's not the reason that I'm gonna switch back to my SRAM force. Guys, welcome back to the What Life. Let's roll. So ultimately, when it comes to shifting, the one thing you want your shifters to do is shift. And guys, I actually think the Wheeltop does it. I know that a few people have reviewed it. Some people have had their issues. I'm going to talk you through where I think they've been going wrong and then how I have found this group set, and ultimately just kind of give you the one or two reasons that I'm going to be switching it back to the SRAM force. Give me a second, we're going to pull over, we're going to do this one properly.
So before we get into this, I built this bike myself and I've managed to get this group set working pretty perfectly, and I'm going to tell you how I did it. Firstly, Oz Cycles has a fantastic YouTube video on it that will go far beyond anything that I'm ever willing to do. It must have taken ages. Go and check that out if you have the group set and you want some tips on how to set it up. From my point though, building this bike up and putting this group set on was actually pretty easy, and the only difficult thing was running the hydraulic cables through the one-piece bar and stem, but that in itself has nothing to do with Wheeltop. That's just annoying new bikes. The next thing I'm going to point out is I want to be completely fair to Wheeltop, and I want to be fair and honest about the world that we live in, especially when it comes to group sets. Shimano group sets, SRAM group sets, Campagnolo group sets. Guys, the one thing you need to know is this group set has one very clear advantage over SRAM and Shimano. And that same advantage is the one thing that can actually make it a little bit difficult. That is quite simple. You can index any gear you want and change that one particular gear. You might be thinking, oh, that sounds like a great thing. That means you can do whatever you want, and you would be correct. But here's the thing. When you buy a Shimano group set or a SRAM group set, when you index it, you can only change it for every single gear. Why is that? It's because for the best part, these group sets come designed to be used together. So you get a SRAM group set. It is kind of designed and pre-indexed to work with SRAM cassettes. The fact that you can put any cassette on this bike and index each gear individually is fantastic, but it's gonna take more time. Infinite possibilities can also mean almost infinite amount of time dialing it in. With a SRAM, and I obviously run the SRAM force previously, or ran it on my old bike, when I was indexing the gears, I'd get to one or two gears and they'd be kind of a little bit raspberry, not quite as indexed as the other ones, and you just have to live with it. Because if you move the group set over, it makes it better, but it will make some others worse. Now on the Wheeltop, you can index each gear individually, so I could go in and change that. So what I have found myself doing is cycling around with the app open and individually indexing gears. Not really a problem, but it's something that you've got to be well aware of, and it's not really something you can just whack on a bike and then ride, because it doesn't have that predetermined set of indexing in. But I did hear that it was kind of semi-indexed for the Shimano group sets anyway, or if you're running a Shimano cassette. But guys, I think that's a little, just a little bit of hearsay. So here's another little anecdote. When I was running the purple Neutron cassette that I have, which was 3411, it runs slightly differently or sounds slightly different to when I run the 3310 SRAM cassette. And I had to index and make a few changes for both, and it really wasn't that hard. Setting up the group set I actually didn't find too difficult. I used the SRAM front derailleur measuring tool, or the placement tool, and that actually made the whole thing a lot easier. If you're going to spend 700 quid for a group set, which is effectively saving yourself some money, go on eBay, go on Google, go on Amazon, and find yourself a little SRAM front derailleur placement tool, little red tab, can't be more than a couple of pounds, dollars, euros, and get yourself one, because that will make the front derailleur setup a lot easier. And personally, I haven't had any problems with it so far.
So I've just taken on a few hills out in the Chilterns, and the shifting on this is fine. I'd even go as far as to say as actually it's pretty good. I've had no problems. I made a real effort to use the front derailleur, and again, it works great. What you can do in the app is basically go in and change the point at which the front derailleur readjusts itself when you are using the rear derailleur. Like I said, give yourself as many options as possible, but sometimes it does create more problems. But it's not impossible to set up. If you've ever done Lego as a child and you've ever watched an entire season of Bridgerton, then you probably have the right level of technical know-how and ability to sit through something that's quite boring to sort out this group set. That's the last season, may I add. Just didn't like it.
So before I get into why I'm going to be swapping back to my SRAM Force, let me just take you through the shifting very quickly. I've actually had no problems with it, and the shifting is the one thing that I've actually found quite good. Obviously set up the front derailleur, haven't really had any problems with it, although I did drop the front chain once going from the big ring to the little ring, but then again I didn't set my high and low derailleur settings. And that is the other thing. Any group set that you set up yourself, you have to set everything. You have to index the gears, you have to set your highs and lows on the front and rear derailleur. Now, what I have found is though, and this is actually quite interesting, there are two shifting modes for the Wheeltop. There is a casual and a racing mode, which kind of doesn't make a huge amount of sense to me. Obviously, it saves a little bit of battery if you are in the casual mode, but the shifting is a little bit faster and firmer if you use the racing mode. But what I have found is when I switch over to the racing mode, I'm almost 90–95% convinced that it changes the indexing a tiny bit. Makes my shifting, even though it is a little bit quicker and firmer, and guys, when we talk about shifting speed, I kind of prefer referring to it as like shifting force or power, like the amount of battery that the shifter uses to move the gear across. You hear a nice firm kind of transition from one cog to the next. That's basically shifting speed. When I put it in racing mode, that firmness, that force is higher. Yes, it's cleaner. It is a better shift. But for some reason in my head, I'm almost convinced that it changes the indexing slightly. So even though it was firmer and cleaner, sometimes I think once I'm in that gear, it's not running just as cleanly. So in my head, I'm actually thinking, why would you have two shifting modes? The obvious answer being to save on battery, having the casual mode. But if you want to be up and competing with the big boys, at least at their entry level, just get one shifting mode and do it very, very well.
So here's the thing. If I switch it from casual mode, which the shifting is okay, haven't had any problems with it, it could be a little bit faster and or firmer. So you switch it into racing mode, and yes, the shifting does change. You get a faster, firmer shift, which is enjoyable. But, like I said, I'm almost certain that it slightly changes the indexing, because now, when I shift gears, that's not going up as it should, and it's just ticking, 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 ticking. So whilst the indexing in casual mode is okay, and I don't hear any ticking, change it to racing mode. There's one or two gears where it doesn't click through. Well, it doesn't click through at all. So it does ever so slightly change the indexing. Quite simply, this has led me to believe why SRAM and Shimano don't electronically allow people to change the speed of their cassettes, because simply too many people would find ways for it to go wrong and ultimately lead to products being returned and a lack of customer satisfaction. So quite simply, as I said, infinite amount of possibilities, fantastic, but also infinite amount of problems.
So inherently, when you review something, you probably go over a few of the things that you don't think work quite so well. And I want to be very clear. I found the shifting on this pretty good. It has been fine. It hasn't missed shifts, hasn't delayed shifts, and the shifts have actually been quite clean and crisp once I have cycled around and indexed my rear derailleur and got all the indexing correct. So let's dive into the reasons why I'm probably going to end up swapping this group set back out. The size of the levers just aren't tall enough. Okay guys, I'm 5'11", I'm not the biggest guy on the planet, but I even find that when I'm down on the hoods trying to get my kind of forearms onto the hoods, there is not enough rubber to grip onto. The levers simply aren't big enough. They're not designed ergonomically for people that are, or just have slightly bigger hands. And I find that I end up trying to like hook the bottom two fingers around, and especially when I'm descending, I just don't feel as comfortable holding on to the top of the rubbers. And that brings me onto the rubber. There's nothing wrong with it. Guys, it is an entry-level group set. This rubber is fine. It works. It's a little bit tacky, it's in terms of feel and touch, but it certainly doesn't have the same grip that you get with some of the higher model Shimano and SRAM group sets. So that combination of a slightly smaller lever and that slightly less tacky, slightly less grippy rubber that's on the hoods, because it's quite firm, just doesn't really make for an enjoyable riding experience. That's not to say, guys, I do want to emphasize, I do like the group set. I just wish the levers were bigger.
So these levers just aren't quite big enough. Let me try and show you what I mean about how much of my hand I can fit around the top of the levers when I'm on the hoods. It just doesn't quite feel like it's enough. Maybe you hit a hole, maybe you hit a little bump. I do just worry that your hands would fly off the top of them. Feels like a pretty simple thing to fix, which is just making the levers that tiny bit bigger. Not a tiny bit, make them a lot bigger.
Also, there is one other reason that I'm going to swap this out, and that is pretty simple. The levers have quite a lot of shake, rattle and roll to them, and when you're riding in the UK on roads that aren't exactly smooth, I just hate that sound of things rattling, because when you build a bike yourself or when you put a group set on yourself, anything rattles is just an indication that something might be wrong. So if I'm constantly hearing rattling from here, I'm not being able to hear anything else from the rest of the bike. Yes, you probably could try and get a mechanic at a bike shop to do it for you, but I still think you're going to come up to that same problem, which is you're going to be riding around and you want a very quiet, clean bike. I just haven't been getting that with this group set. Every time we go over these shaky little grounds or not quite great tarmac, I'm finding that the hoods are rattling a little bit and I'm wondering, oh my God, is something about to fall off my bike? But then I kind of put my head down and realize it's actually just the levers. So the one thing that's probably worth mentioning for the hydraulic disc brake version is the quality of the brakes. And in general, they are fine if you are riding along and you are just kind of rolling through gentle countryside or even an urban environment, you're going to have no problems. I have been finding myself wanting a little bit more bite coming down those steep, sharp descents. But I think if you were to maybe swap out the pads, you could probably get yourself a little bit higher quality on the brakes. But let's remember that this whole system comes in for $700. So if I was to wrap this whole thing up, who do I think this group set is for and how do I think it's performed? Guys, just pick one shifting mode. You don't need two shifting modes. Pick one and make it work very well. Telling me that there is a shifting mode that works here, but there's also a better shifting mode, but it uses more battery, is kind of annoying, especially considering that yes, the faster, firmer shifting mode is better, but it drains the battery more, and I've been told that it doesn't actually let the unit go into sleep mode, which means that if you leave it on overnight, you're likely to wake up in the morning with a dead battery. Pick one, make it work very well. Personally, I haven't had any problems with the shifting. I spent quite a bit of time indexing, and like I said, you can index every individual gear. Not only that, you can change the speed of your cassette, or effectively the speed of your bike. You can run something from a 4 gears up to 13 gears, I think it is, which is quite handy. But then that becomes a bit of a problem because unlike the SRAM and Shimano group sets, which are designed to be used with their components, having infinite possibilities in some ways creates infinite problems. So you've got to be willing to go through that. But I am testament that you can make it work. And in actual fact, it's not too hard. You just got to be willing to cycle around a little bit and indexing your gears. Indexing it in the stand is just something that I don't really like doing, because once you start putting these things under load, I think they do just respond a little bit differently. If I'm honest with you, if they sorted out the size of the levers and a little bit of that rattling, I probably wouldn't mind saying to my friends who are running mechanical group sets, yes, this is a really good option to upgrade. The problem is that suggesting that to people that I know when the levers aren't quite big enough for me, I just would have to make them be aware of that, because it does actually impact the feel of the group set, and it goes beyond that to actually impacting the handling of your bike. So if you are swapping out a group set, you don't really want to have to change your levers from something that you were comfortable with that is slightly bigger, even on a Shimano 105, to the Wheeltop EDS, where the levers themselves are a little bit smaller. Because not only are you then impacting the shifting ability of your bike, potentially, you are also impacting the ergonomic design of the bike, and that could be something that you're kind of locking yourself into, especially if you are running a one-piece kind of bar and stem, because it is a pain to swap out. So I'm going to wrap this one up by saying, obviously Wheeltop sent me this group set for me to try out, and I've been willing to do it on a brand new build. My experience with it has been pretty okay, and if I was just a cyclist that liked riding around and didn't want to go and try and do more racing or crit racing or some more sport road events, I'd probably just be alright with it. If I was running a commuter bike that had a mechanical group set and I was thinking, do you know what, I probably want to upgrade that to an electronic group set, I wouldn't see any reason or any harm certainly in doing that, and you will be able to get it to work. Yes, there are a few issues. Swapping out rear cassettes, dialing them in can take a bit of time, but it is doable. Sorting out your front derailleur, again, my recommendation is try and find things to make it easy for yourself. Those little SRAM, little placement tools, I found pretty fantastic. Don't forget to set your high-low limits. With the brakes though, we can't be expecting super high quality. The overall cost of the entire system just doesn't really warrant the ability for them to provide you with something that is going to give you top tier braking. It's not super sharp, it's not super responsive, but it does brake and it does slow you down. So I've given you the rundown on the levers in terms of ergonomics, but what about shifting? I don't mind the button pressing, it's fine. I'm not expecting the most high level elite quality, but it feels good. I'll also point out that they run the opposite to a Shimano system. So when you're changing your rear derailleur, the buttons are the other way round. This is something that can be swapped in the app.
So your right shifter has 2 buttons and does your rear derailleur. And as I said, set up opposite to how Shimano would shift. Your left shifter is just the single button, and that does your front derailleur. Press it once to go into the big ring, press it again into the little ring, and you'll just keep going back and forth. I like them. There is actually no problem with them. The feeling of the shifters is fine. I don't know what you're expecting, but guys, we're talking about pressing a button. It feels okay. Not exquisite. I press better buttons, but also it's not terrible.
And while we're here, let's talk about the app. It's good. You can do a ton of things with it. A lot of stuff isn't quite written in the correct English that does make it a little bit more difficult, but as I say, go and check out Oz Cycles because he will take you through everything. Anyway, this is probably going to be the last day that I'm running the Wheeltop group set. I've got the new Windspace SLC and I want to be able to go and ride my buddy's Tarmac SL8 Pro and see how similar they both feel. He's got a SRAM Force group set on it and I want to be able to swap mine out so they're both exactly the same and make it a bit more of an even and fair test. I realized that when I was trying to do that with the Wheeltop, it probably wasn't going to, or the Wheeltop itself was actually going to impact that result. So I'm going to take this out for a 100k farewell ride. It's important to note that I don't look at my bike and think, oh no, I'm running the Wheeltop group set. I actually don't mind it and I go out today and I'm probably going to have a great ride on it. I'm just going to swap it out because I know that there are better options available. This is me telling you that you can make it work as long as you don't mind a few of the eccentricities that come with a group set. So guys, thanks for sticking around. If you have any questions about this group set or you need some help setting it up, well, actually go and speak to Oz Cycles. But if he can't help you, then drop me a message and I'll do what I can. Guys, thanks for sticking around. Please do like and subscribe and I will see you guys on another one soon.